Let's start with who's already using OS4. Yeah. How many people we got using OS4?
4 years.
Well, 4 or 4.1.
Any of it? Yeah. Yeah.
It's not a great show, man. It's all right. The previous release of 4.1 was probably a little bit clumsy in the way it handled the user, whereas we've made a few changes to the CD this time. The first thing you'll be greeted with is this little welcome utility, which gives you easy shortcuts to things, i.e. like setting your locale. Setting the locale is part of your end user license agreement, so it's something that must be done, hence why it's the first option. Plus also setting your language and key map settings from here will affect everything you do afterwards. So if you're not an English speaking person normally, you can set your locale first thing, and then everything you do after that will be in your native language. If you need to set up any hard disks prior to booting, that can be done as well. We can load the Media Toolbox utility and set up our disks. We can start the installation utility from here, which then obviously cuts out the long-winded process of booting to Workbench from the CD. Or we can use the CD as a live CD. So if we've got a problem with our installation and we need to try and fix it, we can actually boot to a fully working Workbench from the CD by selecting the last item. You'll notice there's a little help text at the bottom of the screen which just helps to expand upon what each option does. For the sake of completeness, we will boot to Workbench from the CD, and I say it's a long process, but it isn't normally, because there's not a great deal happening from CD. The stuff that's run from startup from the CD has obviously been cut down to try and keep it usable but simple. Just wait for Amiga to come up, which will be the last thing. You'll see there's quite a few drawer icons and disk icons and stuff on my desktop, Workbench I should say, which can be ignored. If you're installing this to a fresh system, chances are there'll only be 1 or 2 drives. So once we're at our Workbench, bear in mind this is booted from CD, we've got various options which you had in the welcome, which would be prepare the disks, localise or install. There's a few little utilities installed by default as well in case you need to do any remedial work. Obviously, for the benefits of our demonstration, we will install the operating system. Now bear in mind this will install from hard drive, so again it will take a little while, although this machine seems to be the quickest ever. All the other machines I've tried it on are at least twice as slow as this one, so you're getting the best. The installation utility is very simple to use. You're prompted at every step. If you've seen the installation utility from before, then you'll be quite familiar with it. Failing that, read the texts. They're very simple to follow. There's an end user license agreement, which obviously you need to click I have read. Whether you have or not is beside the point, but you should. You are obliged to read it. Previous installations have incorporated an update option, so rather than doing an install you can do an update. Unfortunately this version has various changes to the base install, so we've removed the upgrade option, so this needs to be installed to a clean partition which you can set up and format previously. We'll select yes, and away we go. The mention of the swap partition, which is for memory swapping, is also available. That is something that you would set up within Media Toolbox, which you'll have the option to do. The parameters you need to enter are written here. So we can run Media Toolbox if we need to set up our swap partition, etc., or we can format the disk. The disk I've got prepared is all ready to go, so I don't need to do any of that, but that would obviously select your disk and format, ready for installation. The next thing we need to do is to set the target of where we're going to install it to. So I will select the disk appropriately called update1, and that's telling me I've got a bit of space available. We need at least 500 megabytes. This has been updated, was originally 2. Because we've included a few extra bits and pieces, we need a bit more space. And hard disks are not exactly expensive these days, so I think we can afford it. The next step is to tell the installer our maximum screen resolution. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to fool the system for demonstration purposes a little bit later on. So I'm going to tell the installer that my maximum screen resolution is 1280 by 1024. I'm going to assume that the frequency settings are correct. I don't know whether they are, but I'm going to assume so. And I want to select the AmigaOS 4.1 GUI theme. I could select the old 4.0 style, which is the square corners, but the rounded corners are nice, so we'll select the 4.1 theme, and then we'll get a little summary on what we're going to do. Once you're satisfied with that, then we start the installation. And from there, we have to wait, unfortunately. Now, we have got a few banners across the top, which will explain to you some of the new features. It's obviously not an exhaustive list, but it'll explain to you some of the features. As it says, there's been a lot of changes, and there have. The kernel has been updated to offer a reliable memory management system, which is far more reliable than it was. The memory paging to and from disk with the swap partition that you may have set up, that's been improved as well. The DOS system includes new mechanisms for launching programs and tasks such as web browsers and mailers, etc. Plus there's something that's called application tracking. More of that we'll go on to later on. Intuition has been vastly updated to improve the Windows support for fading and rendering and drop shadows, all hardware accelerated. There's reduced video memory consumption as well, so we can probably have more screens open and better graphics, etc. Workbench has also been updated. The Workbench startup drawer has disappeared at long last. There's brand new icons, window themes, scalable icons, etc. There's lots of changes in Workbench, even though it's going to be rewritten. The updated requesters provide new imagery. The installation of the detection of installed hardware has been updated. USB has been updated as well, which should hopefully be a lot more reliable now. A brand new version of Python. This has had an extensive amount of work done on it to include modules and testing with the regression test suite, which is a very important automated test facility for Python, of which it passed a good 90%, if not more, of the tests. Plus we've also allowed, or included rather, some contributions on the CD which are designed purely to give more functionality from a basic install. There are various contributions, again more of which we'll talk on later on. So the installation utility has set up my installation, etc. So now it's saying to me I just need to remove the CD-ROM, which I will. Otherwise we're going to boot from the CD again, which is not what we want to do. Sorry, ever gives it. And then we click finish, and it should reboot for me. Now what will happen, obviously the partition that I've installed to is not set up as my main boot partition, which it would normally be. So I'm just going to go into the boot menu and select the partition that I want and boot from it. You wouldn't normally have to do this, you would normally set it up so that the installed partition is the default one to boot from. The reboot sequence is quite quick, hopefully. Now you'll notice that window that came up, that's to do with the new functionality in Workbench, which is the removal of the Workbench startup drawer. Again, we'll move on to that later on. The window that you're presented with now is very similar to the one you was presented to earlier, but obviously this gives you options that you can tune the installed system with. So we still have the option to review or change the locale settings in case we didn't do it before, which we didn't. And because we're required to by the end user license agreement, we're reminded that we should set it again. We can set the screen mode that we're about to appear on. We can configure the sound card, set up our network, or we can install some of the contributions that have been supplied on CD. Now, let me just check my notes. Right, okay, yes, the screen mode preferences have been updated somewhat, so the available modes is exactly the same. As you'll see, the maximum mode we're allowed is 1280 by 1024. That's what I told the installer my monitor was capable of, but that was a lie. In order to rectify that lie, we've got a brand new monitors tag, and this allows you to set up how the graphics card is initialized and the monitor. The detect settings automatically, what that basically means is that the monitor will tell the graphics card what it's capable of doing, and then the whole system will say, I'll use that data instead. So we want to detect the settings. I will use the 60 Hertz only